that some people just, in addition to leading them to practitioners or giving them correct information, do you find that some people just need to talk to
Oh,
someone?
yes, obviously, yeah. That's why we go on forever. And I think my training in working for Samaritans, which I did for 6 years ago, helps me keep my tongue and use my words carefully, because what I want to do is give them hope, but I want to impress upon them that they have been mistreated and that they need a Lyme literate doctor, someone who understands. And I also do refer at times to doctors that I call know enough to not do harm, because there are those out there that know enough about Lyme, and then there are those that are the experts who know what to do and what not to do, or who know how to treat, actually.
Have you received any notable accolades or awards from your community about?
Well, I've tried to do a lot of publicity. The Providence Journal, forget it. Newport Daily News.
Did you receive a community award?
I did. One of my support group members got together a petition to nominate me as Citizen of the Year in Newport. And believe it or not, they accepted that. I guess the person who called me and told me said that basically the message was there were too many petitioners for us to ignore, because they had always refused to do anything about Lyme Newport. So I did receive that. Unfortunately, it was during COVID, so there was never an award given or a dinner or anything, but there was an article in the Newport Daily News. Unfortunately, that was the reporter who concentrated on my personal bio rather than Lyme Newport. He talked about my growing up and how many kids I had, and that was not at all what I wanted to be printed, but it got the word Lyme printed.
If you could change anything about the status quo that exists surrounding Lyme and its associated diseases, what would you change?
Well, I'd start with the laws in Rhode Island, because as happened when they were initiated, other states would have a domino effect if they were instituted, because I think that there are a few states who have been successful in instituting some of the 6 items in the laws, but not all of them. There's no state that I'm aware of that has all of those 6 things covered. Some of them have got insurance, and some of them are using the disclosure. And what's the other thing? I can't remember right now. But I believe that it would have a domino effect if Rhode Island would just wake up and get with it and proclaim the fact that Rhode Island has laws, and that the patients are entitled to proper treatment, and the physicians are allowed, given permission to treat properly. That would break the ceiling, because now nobody is getting treated properly. They're just being treated by people who say that chronic Lyme does not exist, and if we give you 20 days of doxycycline and you're still sick, you don't have Lyme. And the protocol that they're using, which the doctor at Newport Hospital had sort of outlined, but that I've come to understand better, is saying you have all these different diseases, which Lyme imitates, and they're being treated for the symptoms. For instance, being treated for eye problems. When the problem is not their eyes, is not an optometrist's job. It's coming from, the source is a tick infection, and there are so many younger people, particularly disturbing, who are being treated as psych patients because Lyme diseases manifest as neurological symptoms. And there's a school of thought that doesn't accept that wholly. I guess it's and so that is another thing that just gets in my skin and irritates, because there are young children being diagnosed and treated for autism and ADD, and this is just criminal. It's criminal because they are, some of them very clearly, sometimes I get a call from a mother or a grandmother who, of a 5 or 6 or 7 year old, and say that, you know, they really wonder whether they're being treated properly with the drugs for those conditions. And I just ask a couple of questions. Well, what are the symptoms and problems do they have? And one of the more obvious acute red flags is knee problems with young people, young children. And so I'll maybe work around it and say, is your grandson athletic? You know, yes, yeah, he plays soccer and so forth. And does he have any trouble with his knees? Oh, yeah. And they just attribute it, the doctors attribute it to water on the knee or whatever from too much soccer, or they do not it. But to me, that, in my experience, is a real red flag, is the knee problems, arthritis. And that's what started it all in Lyme, Connecticut. That's what was happening with the children there in the mid 70s. And they were being treated with, for childhood arthritis. And that's another whole long story.
That's good information. Do you have any advice for somebody who suspects that they or their child has maybe Lyme and the associated diseases? What should they do if they are
Well, if they've already gotten to me, that's step one. Because prior, they've gone to medical people who haven't listened to them or accepted what their problem is. And my advice is I try my best to get them an appointment with a Lyme literate physician.
Do you have a network too? If somebody calls you and maybe wants to find a practitioner or somebody, a healer of sorts, in another state, do you have a network of people?
From going to the conferences, I have a marvelous network. And actually, on my website, I think one of my sons wrote some of that in my bio, and I believe it says that I have an encyclopedic knowledge of Lyme. And I hesitate to say that because it sounds very arrogant and whatever, but it's the truth, because I also say at presentations, when we do Q&A, I say, if I don't have an answer for you right now, I will get one in 48 hours, because I have a network of people that I can call to give me the answer. I know who the people are specializing in certain phases, one particularly in psychotic Lyme.
What can you tell other sufferers to give them hope?
That there is hope. It's not an easy journey, but there can be light at the end of the tunnel if you get treated properly. And that's the problem. That's the difficult thing to do, because unfortunately the experts are few and far between, and there aren't any young people coming along to specialize in Lyme treatment. And then that, right now, for me, the only person to refer to in Rhode Island is not an MD and cannot take your insurance. And I am referring generally out of state, Massachusetts, New York. I don't think I have someone right now in Connecticut. The guy in Maine, I would refer to him if I had to. But people have to drive 3-4 hours and pay out of pocket.
Were there any positive things that have come out of this suffering or experience? Lemonade from Lyme's? Anything?
That's always been one of my, is it a hashtag? Is that a word? That I make great lemonade, and I always have. That's kind of my, I go where angels fear to tread. I've been called a bulldog. And so that's that's just part of my modus operandi.
That's because wherever I go in the Lyme community, everyone seems to know you and heard of you. Jane Barrows from Newport, Rhode Island. Everyone has heard of you.
Yes. In fact, you were at the breakfast where we talked, maybe not, but one of the people at that breakfast that we had in Connecticut said, I think we should get T-shirts that say, I'm with Jane from Rhode Island.
I was there.
So I have a reputation, whatever it means, good or bad.
What would you like people to remember about you, your legacy?
Oh, that I worked my damnedest. I worked so hard since 2008 when I started the support group, and especially when I started with the laws in 2015. I got really aggressive with that, with the Department of Health. I'd been working, when I found out about the laws, I worked with the politicians first. And I went to a lot of Senate hearings, and many of which others were with me, and we gave testimony. The amount of testimony that the politicians have gotten, and hard copies of documents and whatever, it's unbelievable that nothing has come of any of it. And then especially Beth's quest. I mean, suicide is common. Well, I shouldn't maybe say that, but it's the leading cause of death with Lyme patients. And so actually, with the time that I have left, and I'm very aware of that, I keep saying I can't go until I get the laws enacted in Rhode Island and Beth's Quest into the schools. The way that Beth's Quest is written is mandated is that it will be in the health department or with the school nurse, or it's specifically designated to go in one of 2 departments in the public schools. And when I've talked to people many, many times about why aren't you doing it, we don't have time. And then in the meantime, you and I are seeing all these youngsters with autism.